Marina looked around the room with a cloudy look. Nothing familiar. The bright sun shone through the thick curtains. So it's day outside. Recent events seem to have disappeared. Instead, there were jumbled fragments of memories in my head. What happened to her? Where is she? How did she get here? The last thing she remembered was the swaying trees and a patch of bright sky. Someone carried her in his arms, but Marina did not know anything about this stranger. I remember only his eyes, gray-dark, like a thundercloud. But unlike the clouds, the eyes did not evoke fear, but calmness, and before that, there was a husband, evening, and a fire. The door opened and the girl saw an elderly woman in a white coat. Olga Ivanovna turned out to be a nurse. Woke up. Well, that's good, otherwise we were already starting to worry. Lucky you, beauty. If you had delivered you to us a couple of hours later, it would have been difficult to fix something. As the staff of the village hospital later said, a local forester brought Marina in his arms, found her in a semi-conscious state, deep in the forest. The doctor diagnosed exhaustion and severe poisoning, so she should tell them a lot. Yes, and the local policeman wants to ask a couple of questions. Since she is not a local, she obviously did not come here herself. But when Ivan found her, there was no one around. But there were wheel marks. Marina remembered this well. Although I really wanted to forget. With Cyril, they met at a party with friends. The girl did not like noisy companies, but her friend had a birthday. The novel quickly grew into something more serious, and after 6 months of meetings, Kirill proposed to her. Much later, the haste became clear. Marina's father did everything to make the wedding memorable, even the only daughter of a far-from poor owner of a large company. Besides, dearly loved. Cyril was a modest manager, but after they got married, his father-in-law insisted that he go to work for him. He signed the company a long time ago for his daughter, but he managed it himself. Marina did not like business. She was fond of nature and reading, led a charitable organization. They lived together with Cyril for less than a year, when his father suddenly died. Healthy and never complaining about anything, he came down with a heart attack. Before his death, he asked very much to be attentive to his spouse. Something that he never has time to check, but there are suspicions. After the funeral, Marina was overcome by longing. The only native person left her, her mother left much earlier than her father, and he never married again. He devoted his whole life to his daughter. I did not want to live, and even more so to delve into the work of the company. Kirill took over everything. Marina was not against it, so be it, and then her husband began to be at home less and less. I could not visit for several nights in a row, justifying myself with a tight schedule. Relations reached a dead end, but Marina could not do anything about it. Gradually she pulled herself together and quickly realized that the cause of the collapsing marriage was not the company at all, and not her. On that day, the girl made a decision. The conversation was to be serious. Marina knew exactly about her rival. It is not difficult for a wife to find the reason for a change in the behavior of a loved one. Cyril accepted all the claims calmly. Marina was even surprised at how her husband reacted. Yes, he stumbled, but he regrets it very much. In his life, because the main thing is she, Marina, therefore he asked to give him another chance. He called me to a picnic and promised to improve. Life did not prepare the girl for meanness. She did not expect bad things from people, therefore she agreed. So I wanted warmth and a real family. It was no coincidence that Kirill chose the place for a picnic, but she also found out about this. Later. He grew up in this remote village on the outskirts of the region. Among the dense forests he spent his childhood. Parents strangely died on the same day when the guy turned 18. No one suspected something was wrong. Both mother and father were lovers of alcohol. The poisoning was perceived as the consequences of drinking burnt vodka, and the son sold his parental home and disappeared into the vastness of the country. Marina regarded the bitter taste of coffee brewed on the fire, while the new cooking option, a barely noticeable aroma of herbs and bitterness, should have alerted the same way as Kirill's behavior. But she was so used to people trusting her only when she couldn't get to her feet. Alarmed. Before my eyes everything swam and doubled, a terrible fatigue rolled over. I wanted to sleep, but there was no sleep. Cyril, noticing the change, grinned, but finally I already thought that such a dose would not work on you, but at least henna for you. Marina, who did not understand anything, just shook her head, which caused the surrounding reality to shatter into fragments. A bell rang in her head. Why didn't you live in peace? She wanted to investigate, she wouldn't go where she shouldn't, she would remain alive, and now she'll have to bury you, cry, portray grief. The girl absolutely did not understand what he was talking about, what kind of funeral, but instead of words she could only mumble her lips indistinctly. They were numb and did not obey, and Cyril was sure that these were her last hours, and cheerfully told the truth. Plants. He became interested in early childhood, quickly realized how little people know about their properties. Nature around was both a healer and a killer at the same time. For example, belladonna is the right dosage and the victim will suffer for a long time, praying for the coming of death. So she can't get out, and since he tried to make sure that Marina rarely saw her friends for her, no one would catch on. They will not find it soon, but there are many wild animals here. They'll try to make sure I can't identify the body. Couldn't say a word. The girl, as if under hypnosis, watched the one whom she considered the best husband get into the car. In fact, it was a terrible person. Confident that his wife will not be able to tell anyone anything. He enthusiastically told how he poisoned his own parents, and then her father. An experienced businessman quickly suspected something was wrong, the balances did not converge. The son-in-law appropriated large sums, covered up the theft with counterfeit papers. In vain he did not close his eyes to what was happening. He would have to live, but he had to be silenced. I just gave her a small dose. He still managed to tell her about what would happen next. She will get worse and worse. Here she will die, but not immediately, she will suffer at first. There was nothing to poke his nose into his affairs and, as if showing off, he said that he had already found a suitable corpse of a homeless woman. So she will be buried with honors instead of Marina. They will find her in a burnt car, everything will look like an accident to her. He will agree with the pathologist, the father-in-law's money will solve all problems. And after that, he will finally live for his own pleasure with his mistress, who is just waiting to move into their luxurious house. He almost succeeded. Marina understood that if it were not for the mysterious forester, who miraculously ended up in that wilderness, she would no longer be there. The doctor just shrugged. Everyone knew that the forester was unsociable. Some kind of tragedy happened to him, and since that time he has little contact with people. The house was built somewhere in the depths of the forest, but carefully fulfills its duties. There is always order in his area. Marina was discharged only a week later, and the weakened body was recovering with difficulty. Her story about what her husband had said helped, but there was something else that the killer added to the coffee. And that made recovery difficult. But still she did. The police took Kirill under control. They decided to wait for the funeral organized by him in order to make him hot. Only Marina's best friend knew what was happening. Even from the village hospital, she called her, telling her in a nutshell what had happened. Through Lena, they kept in touch. The funeral was scheduled for the weekend. Apparently it was not possible to agree with the pathologist right away. The sad event gathered a lot of people, even those who knew little of her came and said goodbye in memory of their father. No one recognized Marina behind a thick veil and dark glasses, and she watched Kirill's acting from the far corner of the funeral hall. The grief looked so sincere, such necessary and beautiful words he spoke, he suffered so naturally. The handcuffs snapped sharply, the expression on his face immediately changed, the mask fell off, he still tried to smile, explaining to those present that it was all a terrible mistake, and then he saw Marina and realized that the plan had failed. Insults and threats rained down, astonished guests became witnesses of how in 1 second a person whom they thought they knew so well could change. "You couldn't get out of there." "No, I calculated everything exactly, creature, you ruined the whole plan." He shouted out a lot more, not realizing in his rage that every word was already working against him. Then there were months of rehabilitation recovery. Marina had not only physical, but also mental health. So it seemed that Cyril was about to appear, and all the horrors would return again. When she finally managed to cope with her condition, Marina went to the village where she was rescued. She never for a moment forgot about the mysterious savior. She really needed to thank him. If not for him, but the psychologist recommended not to think about it, Vasily turned out to be only a little older than herself. Finding an unsociable forester was not so easy. It took local help and a lot of time. And here again she sees gray eyes, like clouds, attentively watching her, and listens to herself in surprise. Why does she care so much about this taciturn stranger? At her words of gratitude, he just nodded dryly. "Not at all, are you all right?" And having heard the answer, he turned around to go on about his business. But Marina could no longer let him go so easily. Somewhere, the thought was deeply hidden that he appeared in her life for a reason. The noisy metropolis has never been close to her, and the girl gladly stayed in this remote village to stay. Vasily did not immediately make contact. A little later, she found out the reason for the strange behavior: his wife and young son died in an accident. Teenagers decided to go crazy. That day, Vasily was at work, the company was gaining momentum, control was needed. He wanted so much that his family did not need anything that he worked day and night. Then this became the reason for blaming himself: if it were not for his work, if he was nearby, if only, it was impossible to return the past. Vasily sold everything he had, and left, far away from people, from the city, and, to be honest, from himself. Here in the God-forgotten village it was easier to get away from questions. And Vasily plunged headlong into nature, specially built a house in the middle of the forest and lived there alone with a faithful dog and wild animals. Marina hooked him right away, but he didn't even want to admit it to himself. He will not return to the city, and hardly anyone will agree to move here of their own free will, especially such a beauty in an expensive jeep. But Vasily did not guess. A year later, Marina closed all cases, leaving the company under reliable supervision. She was in a team, confident and could calmly resolve all issues over the phone. Sometimes she came if his presence was required. The city beauty enthusiastically took care of the house, found a unique wilderness and wild inhabitants. Yes, they perceived her immediately approached, not being afraid of roe deer, both foxes and squirrels looked in, waiting for a treat. Vasily and Marina signed 6 months later. They didn't call anyone, they didn't celebrate happiness, because it should be quiet. In any case, now both knew it firsthand, and they were happy. Like never before, and thanked fate for the fact that, having put them through such severe trials, she still gave them a chance to love again.